It's late at night. I'm in the middle of the desert and I'm looking for the landfill which contains a whole bunch of cartridges. And it's supposed to be around here somewhere. I'm gonna look diligently and... Oh wait, found it. There we go.
Yeah, I was gonna originally do that outdoors in my backyard and pretend that the so-called New Mexico landfill was actually a grassland in Ohio because it worked so well for somebody else, but god damn it, it's cold this time of year. Yeah, anyways. ET The Extra Terrestrial for the Atari 2600 video computer system. A game that has been raped and pillaged by pretty much everybody. And I mean everybody. So why bother? Because if you go out and say the game's the worst ever made, people will go, well, duh. And if you try to challenge the perception and say it's not that bad a game, it's actually pretty good if you give it a shot and you know what you're doing, people will go, you stupid, you idiot. And then there are those that are middle of the road and probably played a hell of a lot worse than ET. Yeah, anyways, I think the only reason why this game gets the worst game ever label is more due to notoriety than anything the game itself does. People often cite ET as the game responsible for that North American video game crash in 1983, when in reality it was only one of many factors that caused the market to fall on its ass back in the day. The truth is that while ET is never going to be regarded as a video gaming classic and isn't that good of a game at all, it's far from the worst ever made. I think in the 30 years since this game's inception, and even before that, mind you, there have been games released to the masses that are far worse and much more deserving of the scorn than E.T., and I've sampled some of those games in a couple of reviews of my own. Much to my own disdain, but I digress. You see, the main issue to be had with ET is that there's something of a stiff learning curve in this game. Unless you have access to the instruction manual or look up an online guide beforehand, you're going to have no clue as to what's going on and what you're supposed to do, and as a result, you're going to be stuck falling into holes constantly, and you're going to get frustrated, and you're going to be like, fuck this game, and you're going to chuck it and have it join the landfill, because apparently that's the cool thing kids do these days. But even if you have some ideas what you're supposed to do, which is collect phone pieces to phone home, avoid the humans, that sort of thing, and you still find yourself getting trapped in holes because holes in this game are where common sense and simple cognitive functions go to die, it doesn't really help matters, does it? So you're roaming around the Earth, which is apparently 6 screens big. I guess it really is a small world after all, I don't know. There's the forest that you started in, the small town, 4 grassland territories filled with pits that you have to fall into to find your phone pieces. That's about it, really. As you're walking about these screens, you'll notice a symbol on top of the screen changing as you're moving about the screen on different sections, different parts of the screen. This symbol represents the power that ET can access with the press of the one sole Atari button. Each symbol represents a different ability that you can enable with that button press, such as revealing the location of phone pieces and teleporting to other parts of the game, among other abilities. A large amount of the confusion is just deciphering what in the blue hell these symbols mean, and without any proper frame of reference or context, there's no way to know what they even do. But then accessing these abilities by situating yourself on a certain spot here and there on the screen isn't exactly a viable means, as you'll reach for a spot that allows you to scan holes for possible phone pieces. But oops! The agent just appeared, and you have to avoid him before he swipes your phone parts. Or the scientist that'll take you back to the lab and delay your progress even further. Regardless, getting into contact with any of your human opponents is bad news and only serves to waste time that you could ill afford to waste. And let's be honest here, it's already a time-wasting affair floating out of those holes. Never mind if you fall back in. If the game gets too frustrating on the default setup, and it will, you can select from 2 other game modes. One game mode only featuring the pursuing agent, and the other game mode eliminating both human opponents, making it much easier, and arguably more boring, to seek out the phone pieces and win the game. And give this game some sliver of credit, this game is winnable. It has an ending, it's beatable. It's frustrating, it's convoluted, it's not that fun, but it is beatable. And at the very least, it is a complete video game, which is more than what I could say for some other games that I've played. But I digress. Graphically speaking, ET is nothing to write home about. The opening title screen looks decent enough by VCS standards, but the game itself looks pretty generic save for the ET sprite that looks enough like ET that you could recognize him well enough. ET is a very green game. You could tell by all the green that can be found in this game, well, 5 parts of this game at least. Seriously though, outside of the sprites which look alright, the graphics are your generic quality run-of-the-mill VCS visuals. Blocky, simplistic, lots of imagination required for this one. Yeah, it's a pretty blanket statement that could be applied to any 2600 game, but it's really the case here, so I don't know, they do nothing for me. Sound-wise, again, outside of the opening title tune, a respectable iteration of John Williams' ET theme, the sound effects in ET are also nothing to write home about. Your usual stock Atari sounds, and in the case of some, annoying usual stock Atari sounds, but that's the perspective of some, really sounds nothing special. So yeah, that was E.T. The Extra Terrestrial for the Atari 2600, and yeah, the game wasn't very good. Worst game ever, though? Far from it. At best, it's a cumbersome, mildly interesting footnote that garnered a reputation for being buried in the desert somewhere, or so they say. At worst, it's a cumbersome, ill-conceived footnote that for all intents and purposes isn't that enjoyable of a video game. It's playable to a point, it's a finished product with a conclusion to aim for, which is something of a rarity in the golden age of video games. But the randomness of the whole thing, along with the steep learning curve and the misconstrued, or rather misguided gameplay mechanics, doesn't exactly it doesn't exactly scream a must-play video gaming classic. I could sort of respect the desire to try for a deeper game experience than what was on the market at the time, but given you only had like 5 or 6 weeks to get it out there, I think simpler would have worked better in this regard. Even Steven Spielberg himself wasn't that impressed when Atari presented the game and suggested the game more along the lines of Pac-Man. Take that for what it's worth, I suppose. In the grand scheme of things, I guess the only reason you want a copy of E.T. is if you had fond memories of the game back in the day. Because there are people that actually enjoy the game, and you know what? That's totally cool. Aside from that, though, there's no reason to hunt down a copy of this game. Especially if you're buying bulk collection of Atari cartridges on eBay or the like, there's a good chance this is buried among the pile. And I've seen collections where they had like 5 or 6 ET cartridges buried in. So, I'm starting to doubt that junkyard story more and more. One way or another, though, E.T. on the Atari 2600 isn't as bad as most folks make it out to be. It's not a game made by the devil or anything, but it's still pretty bad. It's not good. And yeah, that's all I got.